Welcome to the show where self-leadership is the foundation of how you lead all areas of your life. I'm Janessa Finley Ford, and I help emerging leaders sharpen their decision-making from a regulated state and develop the kind of calm, influential presence that people can feel when you walk into a room. Through neuroscience, soul work, and deeply practical structure, I teach ambitious women how to create calm without losing momentum because the most powerful leader in the room is rarely the loudest. And I don't do this mission alone, so let's meet the other visionary behind the project.
Hi, everybody, and I'm SJ. I'm a results-driven leader who leads with conviction and strength, setting an unapologetic standard of excellence. I build high-trust communities where candor and accountability forge dependable leaders. As a certified crystal healer and shamanic earth and energy medicine practitioner, I blend science, spirit, and strategy together to rewire energetic patterns for peace, potency, and purpose.
You can tell a lot about a leader by what happens in the room when the pressure hits. You'll notice some people get sharper, others get louder, some will disappear. Others start micromanaging details no one asked them to manage, and some suddenly need more reassurance, more control, more perfection, more speed, all with the intention that you're just doing leadership. But what if it's survival? And that's what we're going to get into here today. Because most people do not rise to the level of their training under pressure, they fall into the level of their patterning. Now, I will make one exception. If you're out there listening, you're military, you're emergency responder, you're first responder, that, that statement isn't true for you. Been there, lived it. I know the training is much different. You will rise to the level of your training because you've had very specific training for that. But aside from that caveat, I believe that statement holds true for most people that are in leadership positions today. And when you fall into the level of your patterning, your Enneagram type has a very specific way of showing up and revealing your patterns. And this is the unseen layer that we're going to unpack today. We're talking about what happens underneath your leadership when your nervous system no longer feels safe, how the Enneagram 1 tightens control and excuses it by calling it keeping standards. The 2 will rescue everyone while quietly drowning and taking on way too much on their plate. The 3s are going to push for results and disconnect from their body entirely and what their body can actually produce without being overextended. Our 6s will scan for danger and call it preparedness, and the 8s are going to push harder while the room slowly stops being honest with them. And every Enneagram type has a distorted relationship with masculine energy under pressure. Some will overlead, some will force, some will use control or overperform or overcarry. You know who you are. And on the other end of the spectrum, you'll underlead. You'll hesitate, withdraw, overprocess, and avoid the very movement leadership requires from you. And both patterns create pressure instead of safety. And those you work with will feel it and they'll respond. And the seen outcomes are undeniable. There'll be pressure in the teams, pressure in the communication, pressure in execution, tension in the body. And leadership is not just what you say or do. It's what your nervous system transmits into the room before you ever open your mouth. And we talk about that a lot here. And that's also the law of inspired action, which has been a topic of our focus this month. And when balanced with masculine energy, it creates direction, steadiness, safety, movement, progress. But distorted masculine energy is going to create that urgency and force, avoidance or perfectionism, overwork, emotional disconnection, and many other things we got into during our call 2 weeks ago. You can go back and listen to it if you want to get deeper into those details. What the visible effects show up looking like is a team that's walking on eggshells people with definite decision fatigue, micromanagement, burnout, and meetings where people will probably agree to get out of the meeting and to publicly have harmony, and then they're going to resist talking to their colleagues sideways or privately. So today we're getting honest about the leadership patterns we mistake for personality or competence or just, it's how work is. And once you see the pattern running your leadership under pressure, you can finally stop leading from survival. So as always, let's open our eyes. SJ, where are we going to start today on the Enneagram?
Let's start with the heart points. So let's start with the Enneagram 2, the helpers of the world. So what I see in the workplace when the Enneagram 2 is in that over amplified masculine energetic is it's almost like whiplash for the team because they're so used to the person sitting in that like unpaid therapist seat of always listening to every single thing that they have going on. They're always, the morale department, emotional support for the entire team or the organization. And when they hit that like over amplification of the masculine, it can seem very cut off and harsh. They're shorter. They're more direct with their helping you see your flaws or helping you see why your ideas are not good, not good. So I see a lot of that like whiplash with the two where they just become very short. And then on the flip side of that, after they come off of that masculine trigger, they feel bad. They feel bad about it, and then they want to compensate by then burning themselves out by doing the flip of the coin and going back and trying to be helpful again, trying to do everybody else's work for them so that the thing is still accomplished. So I see them picking up more tasks than what they can actually carry. And that is where I really see them hanging out in that over masculine burden. And then they definitely hit that burnout and overwhelm really quickly, and then likely resent when they get home or log out of work of why is this always my load to carry?
Mhm. Yeah. Interestingly, what I observe with an Enneagram 2 in the workplace, I was just trying to dial in. I'll see if I can come up with a story for each type today and keep it concise. But I was reflecting on how an Enneagram 2 didn't necessarily align with inspired action, but definitely the masculine, taking on more and more and more, right? And so they're overextended and they're trying to keep up. And someone in a meeting happened to say the words to them, well, this isn't actually helping because we're not going to meet the deadline. And it was like a vacuum. Like all of the energy was sucked out of the room. It was the most defeating thing that you could say to an Enneagram 2 who's just showing up to try to help. And so the pattern that will be the imbalance that shows up for the Enneagram 2 is that overaction. And in the workplace, you're going to see that a lot of times show up in an attempt to over support, over help, over accommodate, in addition to what SJ obviously identified. And it's going to be so frequent that they'll take on too much for themselves. And they're also the people that if you ask them, like, what can I help with? They're not going to receive the help because it feels like it's going to be detracting from their own worth or value. And so you kind of have to be sneaky in how you help the helper and approach that, but definitely don't ask them if they want help because that's going to be something that they have a hard time allowing themselves to receive. Um, so their inspired leadership really looks like supporting without self-abandoning. And a great check-in for the Enneagram 2 is, am I helping because it's aligned, or am I helping because I need to feel needed? And that's really their ultimate hook is if they feel needed, their ego is feeling so fulfilled, while their body and their mind and all of them is likely really overextended and spread too thin. So that is what I see with the two. Is there anything else you want to add before we move on to the achiever?
Yeah, I think you covered it.
All right. So next up we have the achiever, our Enneagram 3. And they too, when out of balance, is overaction through performance, performative outcomes, and of course, pressure. So the type 3 leader can really unintentionally make their employees feel like the outcome and the task, the project matters more than humanity or the person executing the task. And so the staff may experience them as being overly results driven, overly outcome driven, very much concerned with how it looks if they're meeting deadlines, and also emotionally unavailable. And so teams under Enneagram 3s can have a tendency to produce and also burn out because their producing is from this place of pressure rather than from inspiration. And so the way that the Enneagram 3 can manage the work is tending to lean toward prioritizing speed and metrics, the visible measurements of success and outcomes. And they'll forget about what does it actually take for this to be sustainable? And how do we nurture emotional morale to stay within a deeper alignment where people are inspired to do the work and also are able to do it long term, not just in a short amount of time to meet one particular deadline? And so the threes can bring themselves back to a place of balance by simply asking, am I building success or am I exuding just from that? I feel like performance. Am I performing success? I feel like we say this saying like it's on trend so much, but that's really what I'm getting at here is is my success truly authentic? Or am I just giving an illusion that success is happening because the things that measure the success are moving forward? So I don't have, and you might, SJ, because I know you work with more Enneagram threes than I do. I don't have a specific story to really highlight this in the tangible, real day-to-day what we see, but that is the overview of the Enneagram 3.
Yes. So I feel like their default setting for all of the threes in my life is to move into, when they're in that over masculine energy, is to move into I can outwork everybody. And I'm just going to take on all of the stuff that is visible myself. And I will give the rest of the team the leftovers, the things that are less shiny, less fun, less visible to see. And when they're stressed, like they're doing it from 2 points, right? Like the Enneagram 3, of course, has the performative aspects of them, but also they have a high regard that they can actually do all of the things better than the other people on the team. So they believe when projects get behind that they can just pick up the extra work and get it out there, get it in front of people, and they can market the flaws away. They can, pivot if needed, but they can pitch it's good enough and actually it's amazing, even though there's 5 million bugs in the code. So they'll move into market strategies on how to get buy-in from the external people, rather than divvying up how do we actually get this back into a project that is not just going to be okay and visibly will look good, but is actually sound. So sometimes they stress into that point of it's more important to actually hit the deadline to save face than it is to take a step back and maybe renegotiate what the deadline needs to be, or let the individual that they're giving the project to assume the risk by just being honest of if we go live right now, this is could happen. Hard to say. Maybe it will, maybe it won't. Um, and they also really lean into a little bit, this is more the feminine aspect, but I see a lot of paranoia with them too, within their own team of other people aren't doing enough or they're not going to try to put in their effort. They're not working extra hours like the Enneagram 3 is, because I see that too, where a 3 will put in more hours, work the weekend, work whatever to get the project to a place that it looks good. So everybody benefits from their productivity until the collapse happens. And it always happens because the body can only do so much for so long, to where then you see the 3 disappear. They need a vacation, they're going to go to Cabo, they're going to do something, right? They have to leave. They have to leave for a while. And it's kind of just left in the hands of the team, under well, the team said they got it with or without me. So I guess we'll see if they have it. But you'll see them check out emotionally, mentally, and sometimes completely from like the workplace, because you won't see them come to work and not perform. So they'll just remove themselves entirely from the workplace so that the performance isn't theirs to do anymore, right? It's not their job. So I see that a lot when the 3 is in the over masculine, that they again hit that burnout and then they have to ghost or bounce. Like, whereas I see the 2 self-sacrificing more, the 3 will eventually sacrifice the project or the team for their mental sanity to come back online. Anything you want to add before we move on to the 4?
No, I think that that's sufficient for the 3. We're here to help you. We promise. That might seem a little painful, but it's for
Oh,
your benefit. It's for your benefit.
just wait till we get to our own Ennea types. Just you wait. We're the best
Oh,
at those.
I was already giggling in the intro. I'm like, that's so me.
Right? Yeah. Now, like the 3s don't often hit that burnout stride, right? Like this isn't something that they're always going to hit. So we're talking about within each of these Ennea types an imbalance. This is not a balanced individual moving through work, right? So realistically, when we're going through this, just pay attention so that you can notice the signs of, ooh, I'm starting to hit the weird vibe of my Ennea type, so that you can intervene before you hit the actual end game of this like burnout strategy, because everybody's going to hit burnout or overwhelm or avoidance or whatever happens. So the key is just to see the pattern in yourself so that you can choose to course correct rather than letting it play out in a very dysfunctional manner.
Absolutely. Or bringing some compassion to other people if you know your
Yeah.
type really well, so you're further along in the Enneagram learning curve than that, then you can start seeing when people are starting to glitch and fall into their patterning, and you can show up in a supportive way for them.
Mhm. Moving into our Enneagram 4s, the individualists. The 4s always bring that emotional depth into the systems that desperately need that level of humanity. And they're often the people in organizations asking, yeah, but does any of this mean anything? Like, why are we doing this? Like, what is the reason behind it? Which is a fair question. But under pressure, the Enneagram type 4, when they hit that masculine stride, starts to over identify with the emotional states, ratchet them up, and also continually ask the people who are also stressed out on their team, how are they feeling? Oh, are you stressed? How do you feel about this? What is going on? Which is probably great for lots of the feelers in the group to be acknowledged and recognized. Let me tell you, as an Enneagram 7, nothing makes me want to have an entire crash out more than being asked how I feel in a moment of stress and trauma. Because my real answer is I have no fucking clue, nor do I want to find out right now until we can get past this terrible catastrophe. Like, I don't know. I will process this shit later, but right now I need you to stop talking to me. So they just bring a lot more emotional intensity into that already intense situation that can be pretty overwhelming. And also, then we kind of shift away from that focus of how do we just get the thing done if that is what we're trying to do. And they'll have a little bit of that stagnation due to the level of processing that then needs to occur, as well as it's a little bit demotivating for some of the other Enneatypes on the team to have to belabor how this thing has been terrible and makes everybody feel awful. So I see that a lot within the Enneagram 4s and teams that don't possess a lot of 4s. So like if you have a 4 leader and the rest of your team are head points, it's probably not the most ideal path in order to get to a place where the team feels like they're not required to live in emotional chaos with you in order to kind of move forward, even though the four is coming at that from the best of intentions and wanting the team to know, like, I acknowledge this is terrible and this is hard and I'm here for you and we can talk about all of the problems that are happening. But really leaning into that growth edge for the four is having the ability to acknowledge that all of these things are heavy and then still being able to step back and then move forward as well.
Yeah. So you hit it on the head. The fours will fall into under action. So that's how they will typically fall out of the alignment with the law of inspiration through this emotional looping. A story about how this happened in real time. I went to a subject matter expert to inquire, so ask some questions about a process because we were having some hiccups. And like, look, me, this person, and every other human that had been involved in the process that were trying to iron out the hiccups or experiencing them, we were all over it. Like, it was frustrating, which is why I was like, okay, I need more information because I want to go put a like completion stamp on this situation for good, but I feel like I'm not asking the right questions. So I'm going to get some different information, different perspective, different angle. And just in asking questions, this lovely Enneagram 4, what a three wing, was instantly spicy, like super annoyed. And I think they thought that the whole thing was I was going to leave it for them. Like I was assigning them work and they're not even within my chain of command for me to be able to assign them work. And they would have taken it for sure and done the work because they are really awesome like that. But it was the instant emotional response and then they were, after a couple exchanges, they're like, "Oh, I'm not trying to be, like short with you. It's just, this is frustrating." And, the reality is, and this is not particularly an Enneagram 4 specific thing, it's just the fours fall into their fields a little more often. And this is for all humans when we're emotionally triggered. We're not always intending to be reactive toward whoever is in front of us. But the reality of the situation is that's exactly what's happening. Like it's stemming from the problem that's in front of us, but it's definitely being channeled to the individual, which was me in the moment. And I'm like, yep, no worries. I just needed the information so I can ask the right questions and put this to rest. And that's all I needed. So we're good. And I'm done. I'll see you later. And I just turned and walked away. And I think if they had known, like if I had told them up front, like I'm just coming for information, I think that exchange would have went a lot differently too. Or if when I noticed that they were falling into their emotional reaction, I had made that known up front, it would have gone a lot differently as well. But we all live and learn, and I just thought a couple questions would be really benign. But for the four to return to balance, a quick, easy check-in is asking what action would move this forward, even if I don't fully feel like it or feel inspired about it or feel happy about it, like whatever it takes, right? Whatever your feeling of choice is to get you moving, like focus on the action. What action needs to happen? And then take the action. So, moving on to our Enneagram 5s, the investigators. This type is another type when they fall out of alignment with the law of inspiration, they are falling into under action, generally through that overanalysis, as we talk about with the Enneagram 5s, who are like human Google search resources. And this I am seeing so much right now as my team has shifted tasks and learning all sorts of new things. And this particular Enneagram 5 I work with, they create such an internal pressure of being behind. I don't know where, somewhere I swear, when they were a young child, they must have been told that they were behind and they pressure themselves to move very quickly. But when they don't know enough, it's very disjointed, their movement, because they're trying to analyze and overanalyze and just go based upon what they know because researching, which is what they're innately driven to do, it takes too much time and then they can't go fast enough. And I'm just watching this loop happen. And I'm like, we have to have peace with our pace. That's most important. And also, let's shift how we're measuring success right now. Like, did you recognize when you needed to ask a question because something looked off? And did you learn something today? And if both of those questions are yes, at the end of your day, you've been successful. So do the research that you need to learn the stuff to get out of the over, analysis of things and just jumping beyond like, well, I don't know this one little piece of the puzzle, but I'm just going to go ahead and take a guess that this might be the right thing and we'll see how it goes. Like, no, we can't do polished work like that. Like I get that in the learning, the training experience, but let's just slow it down. So it's really interesting to see this type 5 who is so driven to reserve their resources and use them adequately throughout the day, get caught in the spiral of pressure around doing the work quickly enough. And it's completely against the grain of who they are because they're really created to be this person who would research and create the space to research. So it's quite an interesting conundrum for them. But inspired leadership for the 5 really looks like using their wisdom and translating it into action. So applying the wisdom that they have and putting it into action. And I think you can see where in the example I gave, that hasn't landed quite yet for this particular individual. So, a way that the Enneagram 5 can return themselves to balance with a quick check in is asking, do I truly need more information or do I need movement at this point? What do you see with our 5s?
I see the stalling of movement as well, but I see it through intellectual superiority though. So correcting everyone, over explaining, mentally dominating rooms, also pointing out all of the flaws of someone else's strategy or idea, but offering no solutions to the problem areas or the flaws. It's just everything that is wrong about the ideas or the thought process or the product flow as well. And it can feel a little condescending and berating when they're in those rooms of really I sometimes feel like when they're in this imbalance of the masculine, like the whole goal is to delay forward movement, to just give them by themselves more time to be able to figure out, learn, read about all of the things. So I see a lot of this like buying time with really touching on areas that the other individual doesn't understand or didn't have an understanding of or knowledge about. But at the same time, those problem areas maybe don't even have anything to do with what the actual solution is that we're trying to solve for. So I see a little bit of the like, it's like gaslighting through intellectual intelligence too, to where they'll kind of point out every flaw with what the individual is saying, even if that flaw doesn't pertain to the problem that we're solving. So I see a lot of the delay with the Enneagram 5s within that area of really trying to slow the process down so that they have time to, I don't know, learn about the things. And then they'll come back to the table later with options, but they don't necessarily provide options on the fly. And they definitely don't do it if they feel like they were blindsided by the questions or someone else coming up with a solution. So there's a lot of that too, where, a growth edge too with a 5 could be just simply saying, I need 24 hours to take a look at this before I can provide comment or thoughts or whatever. Like simply being more direct with the fact that you would like more time to be able to look at something before responding and then providing a reasonable amount of time. But often I just see the delay being weeks or even months until they feel like they have everything that they need to be able to move forward with the concepts as well. Anything else before we move
No,
on?
no. That's so inefficient, right? I'm like, that's a long time to delay. How is that even reality?
It
Like,
is.
okay,
It
moving
is.
forward, because I would probably get stuck here for a while. Like, we don't have that long in our workplace to try
Mhm.
to
Right. And
research.
certainly in technology where I work, there are tons of fives. So, like,
Mhm.
this trap of delay is real to where you have to be cognizant as well as a leader, whether you're a five or another leader, to acknowledge that they need a little bit of read ahead time before you can engage with them, or you're going to be met with this very obstinate behavior of being very unhelpful, even though they're the brains that we need to solve the thing. So give them time, give them just a bit of lead time. No blindsiding. Moving into our Enneagram type 6, the loyalists. Well, I feel like when a 6 is in that over imbalance of the masculine energy and outside of that aligned action, they give a lot of directions and assignments that are half baked, and it's more like recon work. So it's like put together a spreadsheet that tells me XYZ, and then hey, other person, put together a spreadsheet that tells me the opposite of that, and then person C through F do the same thing but with completely different things so that they can really pull and look at which one they want to choose, but they're not very forthcoming with the fact that that's what they're doing is essentially gathering market research for all of the options. So the team can feel that impact of, did I just waste my time putting this together because we're not even doing this? And it's also a lot of focus on risk analysis rather than potential outcomes that could work. So everything is very hyper focused and fixated on what are the risks that we could be missing rather than that forward movement. So I see a lot of the delay with the 6, but the delay in the 6, unlike the 5, is it creates work for everybody else on their team because they want everybody else to really come and give their opinions so that that 6 leader can still pull the audience of the team to then make a decision later on. So I still see a lot of that masculine energy becoming hypervigilance within the Enneagram 6 to where just feels like you're in a worst case scenario Olympics in every meeting that you're on with them. And it's just everything that could go wrong, all of the 5 million catastrophic outcomes, and, one possible coup attempt that has never happened but may happen. So we should probably, consider what we would do should that occur. And I can tell you as a 7, like there is nothing more demotivating than an imbalanced 6 who wants me to do risk analysis and talk about all the terrible things and nothing else. Like, I mean, I don't know. Hopefully the sky does fall and death is the outcome because that sounds better than sitting in another one of these meetings. Is
And that's for
often.
an Enneagram 7. Like, whatever you are out there, there's going to be that type that will probably be the most triggering for you. That's not across the board, just to be clear.
Yes. Yes. So you just see a lot of the internal anxiety loops becoming external for the team as well, to where the team really has to help process that anxiety loop for the Enneagram 6 leader as well. So a growth edge for that Enneagram 6 leader is really leaning into the fact that fear can't become organizational strategy. Like it's not actually a strategy that you can employ. It's something that you should acknowledge and you shouldn't ignore and you should process that. But while you're processing that, you also have to be able to look up and determine how best to move forward without stagnating in the worst possible scenarios that may or may not happen. So really leaning back into you're a head point. So that logic of what is the probability? Like if it's less than 50%, maybe we should probably deal with it later. And I'm sure every 6 out there is cringing with my, let's just, anything that is not a 50% probability, like move forward. You can always pivot if needed.
So I see the 6s really oscillating between overaction, but then also paralysis.
Hmm.
So you kind of get this back and forth with them. I have many stories about Enneagram 6s in the workplace, but I don't want to sit on the Enneagram 6 for too long. So I think actually I'm just going to share kind of the overview of them and break it down with how relationally with staff they'll show up when they're imbalanced, which can be overreactive, doubtful, approval seeking when they're under stress. And I think also sometimes that anxiety can even grow into a state of paranoia also. And sometimes for the sixes, being able to live with the reality of the facts is really challenging for them because of this anticipation that is occurring. And so when it comes to managing the work, what do we see? As SJ pointed out, this over preparedness, anticipating all of the problems excessively, and that leads into just struggling for confidence with all areas of if they're making the right decision, making the decision, which action to take, being in action. And so, really, for the six, having inspired leadership will look like steadiness that's rooted in trust for them. So, if you're an Enneagram 6 and you're wanting to return to a state of balance when you feel yourself being pulled out, a quick check in, ask yourself, am I responding to reality or am I responding to anticipated danger? And then bring yourself back to the facts and focus on that part. That part's going to lead to the most benefit for everybody because it's the scenario that's really truly playing out. So moving on to this type 7, did you want to start this since this is you?
Sure. Well, we are really annoying when we're imbalanced. Let's start there. Sevens are quite terrible when we are leaning into an over masculine energy. I've long held the belief, though, that Enneagram 7 wing sixes display very differently than Enneagram 7 wing eights. Like they just seem like two very different creatures. And I think you see it even more in their triggered states as well. Like the motivator, of course, is the same, underlying the same, but the outward display looks different. So seven wing eights, when they are in that firmly over exaggerated masculine energy, they'll take action for sure, all the time, all the action, more action than anybody on their team likely wants ever in their life. They're also pretty domineering. They're very ordery. They're pretty berating. They want you just to move forward and not have to talk about how you feel about the 27th pivot that we've had to make because nobody took the time. And by nobody, I mean the seven wing eight to think about what is actually the best option. They just made a decision because it felt right in the moment. And then we got, a week down the road and the moment had changed. So they made a new decision. So there's lots of pivots that can happen with the seven wing eights, but there is an over exaggeration avoidance of how the team feels while they're having to move forward as well. And they're pretty berating and derogatory when anybody disagrees with what decision they've made or wants to talk about a pivot that they hadn't considered and maybe should have considered. I think you also see a lack of accountability too, to where they're really good at pitching market strategies of how it's not their problem or their team's problem. And they're really good at the convincing energy within that too. So I'm sure that's extraordinarily annoying. Or people just get tired of their high energy within this emphasis to where they just give in to the seven wing eight. I feel like quite a bit. Seven wing six, I see that too. Then on the flip side, with the seven wing sixes, I see a lot when things get tough of that person bounces. Maybe they quit. Maybe they pick up a full-time, I have to go to a university to learn something else now, so I can only be part-time now. You see a lot of resistance to accountability with the seven wing six for sure as well. But I see more avoidance energy with the seven wing sixes to where they just kind of ghost the team. Like when times get tough, they'll bounce. I actually see a lack of action with the seven wing sixes that I don't see with the seven wing eights. Like I feel like the seven wing eight over actions itself when it's imbalanced, and the seven wing six just kind of disappears, goes on vacation, takes some sick leave. And then we'll come back and kind of hope that the traumatic thing has been resolved by someone else. So that's what I see a lot in the workplace is, of course, the avoiding of any emotional toll that's happening, but also a lack of accountability in conversations as well. And just so much reframing of positivity, but also deflection of how the problem areas couldn't have been avoided or a lot of that, well, it could be worse, right? There's starving children in Africa, silly things like that as well.
Yeah, I am going to just cut to the chase here that the inspired leadership of an Enneagram 7 would most look like their vision paired with sustained focus. So holding that focus longer term. And if you're an Enneagram 7, you feel yourself getting pulled out of balance, a quick check in to bring yourself back into a centered state would be what actually deserves my energy long enough to complete, taking it all the way to completion and then focusing on leading that part of the project, job, people, whatever you've got going on. Moving on to our Enneagram 8, the challenger. When they are imbalanced, they fall into overaction through all of their intensity and force and their natural masculine energy. So, relationally with staff, they're going to unintentionally, but nonetheless, still dominate conversations. They're going to overpower the quieter employees. And they're also going to unintentionally create environments where people comply rather than collaborate with one another. So while staff may respect them quite deeply and authentically, they may also simultaneously fear disappointing them. And when you're working from a place of moving away from fear, it's hard to do your best work, let's be honest. An Enneagram 8, when they're not balanced, what it looks like with managing work, they're going to move really fast. That masculine energy is going to cause them to push, to speed up, to get stuff done. They may even override processes or nuances just for the sake of pursuing that outcome. And they're also going to be less aware or nurturing of emotional realities too. We're just going to become very outcome focused. What inspired leadership really looks like for Enneagram 8s is that their strength, because they are very strong, that pure strength, but without the intimidation. So if you're an Enneagram 8 and you find yourself a little out of balance, a quick check in would be, am I leading this or am I forcing it? Sweet and simple.
Yeah, I see much the same with the Enneagram 8s as well, to where they really want that compliance when they're in that imbalanced state of the overarching masculine. And then they're pretty upset and resentful then when the team could have provided input and they didn't because they just complied with the direction rather than raising the concerns to the Enneagram 8. And then that runs that terrible cycle for the Enneagram 8 of feeling betrayed by their team because the team knew and didn't say anything. So it just keeps running that, like, I can't be vulnerable and I can't trust people's cycle for the Enneagram 8 because when they're stressed, they really do lean into that control. And I think that most eights don't realize energetically how much pressure they emit in just a natural balance state, let alone when they're triggered. So I'm not going to belate, whatever. I don't even know what word I'm looking for. It starts with a B, but that's okay. Any further. But for the Enneagram 8, just allowing space for the team to have opinions, even in those stressful times. Like you can create a timer. I have to create a timer on how I process feelings. So 5 minutes of let me know what your concerns are with this, even so that the team still has a space to be heard, where they're also not going to be berated or feel like they disappointed that Enneagram 8 leader. Moving into the Enneagram 9s, our peacemakers, I think they're like the best at just saying, I'm fine. It's fine. Everything's fine. I see the type 9s nervous system especially experiences conflict as fragmentation. So instead, they just accommodate, numb, delay, disappear into low priority tasks while pretending that they're just really, really busy. So I see inaction with our Enneagram 9s. And then I also see with that masculine energy coming in, there's like passive resistance though. So there's a little bit of that undermining behind the scenes, not face to face, but there's a lot of that emotional sedation too, to where that underleading just becomes like self-erasure in the process. And then you have resentment too, but they disconnect from their own priorities and principles when they're in that over masculine triggered state as well. which, of course, for the team, lots of frustration is going to erupt, not just for the team, but also for that Enneagram 9 leader, too, to where suddenly that calmest person in the room just sent one of me email so emotionally loaded that HR can feel it from an entirely different building. So that bomb crash out of the 9 is real. And often I think it's shocking even to the 9 when it happens as well.
Yeah, sometimes that's hard to believe is shocking, but I agree. I think they don't see it coming when they're just not in tune with how much is building internally when they're upset. So as SJ highlighted, the imbalance with the 9 when they're out of alignment with the law of inspiration is really an underaction through disengagement. And a quick check-in for our Enneagram 9s when they find themselves out of balance is asking what conversation or decision have I been postponing that leadership requires now? And I sort of kind of feel like you actually posed this question to me earlier today.
I did.
Yes. So it's a good one. And, I have a 9 wing. What can I say? Sometimes it shows up. So our last type here as we move to the top of the hour is the type 1, which is my main Ennea type. And our strategy of overbalance or imbalance is overaction, of course. And it's through correction, control, refinement, improvement, perfectionism. I forgot my funny story at the beginning of the show. I'm going to go for it now, but it's pretty short and I don't know how funny it is. But we were in our regular staff meeting and we had a reorganization. So it was the first time having a staff meeting with these individuals. And after the meeting, one of the new people um, said that it was just way too serious of a meeting. Like people really need to lighten up. And I find this funny because like I am not a big deal, but I do believe that quite often the temperature of that meeting reflects if I'm all business, if I am just joking and lighthearted. And that day it was all business because there was all business to get done. Like I needed to be in this meeting, direct to the point, and out of this meeting. And this individual was like, oh, well, if that's the case, then you've got to I can't remember what exactly they said, but essentially something like lighten up. And I'm like, oh yeah, for you and the whole world, like everybody agrees with you. But that is like the Enneagram 1, I feel like can really come in and change, like all of us can change the temperature of the room, but I feel like the Enneagram 1 can sometimes get so rigid that it can really tighten up the energy in a room really, really quickly. And this can also happen when they're working with other individuals, get really rigid and maybe not leave enough room to let the other person be who they are because the Enneagram 1 might think they know the best way of doing something and they might think they're helping when they project that onto the other person, especially if it's uninvited. So their staff can often feel micromanaged or overly corrected, like there's too much correction going on. And their staff can also feel like things aren't quite enough ever, which can be really demoralizing to them. So, really have to keep in check the desire for excellence and how that is received and perceived by the individuals around them. Now, when it comes to managing the work, Enneagram 1s can over edit, over perfect, over monitor. I mean, we are just all of the overaction happening, really. The more stressed we get, the more we become rigid and over functioning. And so while we love ourselves some efficiency, when we're doing all of that over garbage, guess what happens to efficiency? It tanks. So leadership for the Enneagram 1 from an inspired state really looks like really clear and clean standards without any emotional pressure for people to reach them. They just know where the bar is. It's up to them. And returning to balance, if they're getting a little out of balance, a quick check-in. Am I improving this or am I compulsively controlling it?
Love it. I'm not going to add much to that. The corrective behavior is definitely what I see. And I feel like Enneagram ones are the original creator of group punishment. So, like, if they have one problem child, they definitely make a rule for like the whole team that I see, where like we're as a team going to have to listen to this and why we have to have this rule and why it needs to occur as well. To where sometimes the teams can stop feeling like they're being led and it's more like they're actually being inspected by the Enneagram one, to where it just creates that kind of like the eight, to where people don't speak up as much when the one is in that mode of imbalance as well. And I think the growth edge for the Enneagram one is also looking at, am I creating this standard or this rule for one person? Or is it really something that is overarching a problem with the organization? I think ones often take an over responsibility stance of themselves, to where if an individual could be one person on their team that's not performing well or has personality issues or whatever, they become responsible for that person's success, to where they feel like they have not done enough for that person to be successful, rather than just saying maybe that person is actually the problem. So I think a growth edge for a one is stepping back and, honestly just saying it's actually not me, it's them. And here's the standards. And like Janessa said, they can meet them or not, but it doesn't have anything to do with me.
For sure. Well, we're almost out of time. So, really quick wrap up of today's episode. We really pulled the curtain back on leadership style being not always your leadership, actually. It might be your survival pattern, it might be your personality, it might be the patterns that you loop in and what those patterns look like specifically for each Enneagram type and how they show up, of course, in the workplace when you fall out of alignment with the law of inspiration. And while, it really sucks to be quite honest, because high capacity women in general, women and men also, but women are truly rewarded for these patterns, even though it pulls them more out of alignment than it does generally men speaking, because of that overuse of masculine energy. It comes with a personal cost. And oftentimes, before they realize the personal cost, their nervous system, they're requiring that it it run an Olympic event, and they didn't sign up for that, but they're doing it anyway. So this conversation wasn't about becoming a softer leader. It was about becoming a safer leader, safe inside your own body, safe in your own decisions, safe for the people that you lead. Because real leadership, inspired leadership, is grounded movement. It is clear direction. It is steady execution, and it is power without pressure. And if you're realizing that you've spent years leading from your survival instead of your true alignment, Stronger Together was built for exactly that kind of awakening. Inside Stronger Together, we are going to interrupt those patterns that you loop in real time, the patterns in your body, the patterns in your leadership, the patterns in your relationship. And we're going to do it in the exact moments your nervous system wants to default back to its overleading, underleading, controlling, overworking, rescuing, hiding, whatever version of it that you run. And so we invite you to come get in the room with us where you can lead without abandoning yourself. You're going to build success without building chronic exhaustion or illness. You're going to hold standards without living in tension. Be able to move from that grounded masculine structure instead of a survival pressure. And really finally feel powerful without constantly feeling like you have to be on. And the goal is not to become someone else. It's just to stop letting unconscious patterns run you and the room. So come join us inside Stronger Together. Your leadership gets lighter when your nervous system stops treating life like it's a constant emergency. You can grab your seat by visiting www.strongertogetherinstitute.com. We will be back here the second Wednesday in June. And until then, keep your eyes wide open.